Good afternoon, members of Parliament, support staff, visitors in the Public Tribune radio listeners, TV viewers, those following via social media, and members of the media. Welcome to this continuation of the Committee of Public Housing, Spatial Planning, Environment and Infrastructure meeting number 4 for today, Wednesday, July 17th, 2024. I also welcome the Minister of Public Housing, Spatial Planning, Environment and Infrastructure, Mr. Patrice Gomes, and his support staff. We've established a quorum of 7 members. Please stand for a moment of silence. I've received notice of absence from the following members: MP Francisco La Cruz, MP Akeem Arundel, and MP Omar Otley. Does any member of Parliament have any notifications from the floor at this time? I see MP Marlin. You have the floor.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Good afternoon to the Honorable Minister and his support staff. Good afternoon to the listening audience. Madam Chair, I have a small notification. As a faction, as a National Alliance faction, we have sent in numerous urgent requests for meetings, and here we are at several meetings again this week, and none of our meeting requests have even been answered. So I'd like to bring this matter up in this meeting, that we would like to get answers on all our meetings requests and the status of them. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Marlin. I now give the floor to MP Duran. 1 second, MP Duran. I would ask all members, the little card on the side, please push it in. That way your name will pop up and I will know who exactly to give the floor to. MP Duran, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. Good afternoon to you, my colleagues, the Honorable Minister, his support staff, and everyone listening to the sound of my voice, whether online or via radio. Madam Chair, I'd like to expound a bit as well on the point brought forward by my colleague, because it's a GB meeting return that the Prime Minister did not come back to. It was promised after 1 week. The urgent TIAT meeting request, where we asked to discuss the finances of the port and the airport and anything related to such. The urgent justice meeting based on the hike in crime, it was confirmed, it was put on the agenda, canceled last minute. And you know, we see a constant trend with that is concerned, and other urgent meetings as well. But when you look at this, it seems as if it's only certain meetings, depends on if it's called by the coalitions, on being honored. And I would hate to think that that is the case, and Madam Chair, would really like to get some clarification on those points, and also other outstanding requests that are in from the faction as well. At the end of it, we are all equal members of Parliament in here, and there's only distinction is the presidium, which decides when and how meetings are called, and I would hope that some fair treatment then would be covered where that is concerned, because obviously I'm of the opinion that that is not the case at this point in time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, MP Duran. MP Wescot-Williams.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady, and a good afternoon to you, of course, to my colleagues, and to the Minister, our Minister Gomes, here present this afternoon, and his support staff. Good afternoon to all. Madam Chair Lady, in this part of the notifications, I sort of want to echo comments made by the MPs who spoke before me, namely that not only do we have several requests in for meetings, by the way, including from myself, but I would want through you and the Parliament to impress upon the ministers to not only see as much as possible how they can respond and accommodate requests for meetings. That's one. And secondly, just recently, in my capacity as chairperson, I sent a reminder to the Council of Ministers regarding responding to questions asked by members of Parliament, as you know, and that was highlighted in my letter reminding the Council of Ministers of their obligation to respond, that according to our rules of order, ministers are required to respond within 3 weeks, and if not possible, to indicate that such is not possible. So I just, again, want to put that out there. with respect to this particular meeting and Minister Gums being here, I will be repeating some of the questions that I have posed to the Minister of ROMI even before Minister Gums took office, just that we understand. So thank you, Madam Chair Lady, for allowing me to highlight that, please.
Thank you, MP Wescott. I will let MP Jacobs have the floor next.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. Good afternoon to you. Good afternoon to my colleagues, the Honorable Minister and his staff, the Griffier, and of course, any and all persons following this meeting of Parliament, committee meeting of Parliament. I believe in these deliberations, Madam Chair, that we should indeed clarify for the record, not only to add what was mentioned by the previous speakers, not only have meetings been called and then summarily postponed, no reason is given for such. And in my memory, I know that, yes, there were times when sitting on the seat of the minister when it did not work out to be able to come upon the time at the time requested. But just like members of parliament are required to give reason as to why it is an urgent request or what the request is about, I would believe that the ministers also, in their response, or that Parliament should request that ministers requesting postponement give a reason for such, because I cannot just open it, make a plan around a meeting and then get a notification, postpone upon the request of the minister. I mean, that means then these meetings may never happen in this sitting. And we know there's an election coming, yes, but if we're going to take the time during our recess to plan these meetings, and as a matter of fact, on topics that are of importance to the people of St. Maarten, and this is a government that is supposed to be supporting transparency and accountability, I would think that you can come and answer or at least give a good reason why you're not able to come, especially when we call for urgent meetings, Madam Chair. So I do look forward to hearing via you, via the Presidium. I did hear the Chair Lady of Parliament just speak in her capacity now as a committee member, and in that she reiterated the request from the Council of Ministers to honor the requests. But I would hope that it would go further than that, and we would see the respect towards Parliament and its processes. Thank you very much, Madam Chair Lady.
Thank you, members of Parliament, for your notifications. And I do have to agree as well with the sentiments that something I myself over the last term have said, that there needs to be adequate reasons given for why ministers are not coming to meetings. I will confer with the SG offline if I can to be able to answer the pending meetings. Can I adjourn now, later? I'll adjourn for 3 minutes now just to confer with the SG so that I can respond to the notifications and questions. Meeting adjourned for 3 minutes. Welcome back, members of the Committee of VROMI. I just took a few minutes to confer with the SG and Secretariat on the notifications provided by several members of Parliament. Just to update for MP Marlin, based on the notification given on letters or meeting requests from the National Alliance faction, we've identified that there are 3 documents that have been submitted, responses then from the President of Parliament regarding number 1, under UV 202, 1 reply responding to several different letters and requests, UV 203 regarding GB, and UV 204 regarding the budget amendment, all sent on the 8th of July, which are available in incoming, yes. Yes. So those would be available to you, but they were sent. Regarding the TEAT meeting request on funding of the airport and the port, we are currently investigating scheduling that meeting. And regarding the justice meeting, the urgent justice meeting, that was indeed scheduled for last week. However, due to a death in the family, the minister requested that the meeting be postponed, and we are investigating the possibility of including that agenda point in the meeting this coming Friday on the higher education ordinance, since the minister himself will already be here in Parliament. So you will receive an update from the Secretariat on that this week before Friday, hopefully. Yeah. So with that, I will, does that answer the notifications sufficiently, MP Marlin? Okay. Thank you. With that, we move on. The agenda point for this meeting is a discussion regarding the report by TNO entitled The Energietransitie in Aruba, Curaçao, and Sint Maarten, IS 827-2023-2024, dated June 18th, 2024. And we go over to the agenda point. On June 18, 2024, Member of Parliament, Mrs. Sarah Wescot-Williams, sent an urgent request to the Committee of Public Housing, Spatial Planning, Environment and Infrastructure for a meeting to discuss the report, The Energietransitie in Aruba, Curaçao, and Sint Maarten. This request is recorded under IS number 827, dated June 18, 2024, and can be found on the Parliament General Teams. The report, compiled by TNO of the Netherlands and registered under IS 833, 2023-2024, also dated June 18, 2024, examines the state of the energy transition in the CAS countries, Curaçao, Aruba, and Sint Maarten. It includes findings relevant to accessing funds available through the SDE++ instrument for investments in renewable energies in these countries. Given the ongoing discussion about the current energy crisis and possible solutions, which were shared during the Central Committee meeting number 20 on June 17th and 25th, the request for this meeting was honored and held on Thursday, July 4th, to discuss the conclusions and findings of the report. The Minister of VROMI made a presentation, and the members of Parliament posed their questions. The meeting was then adjourned to allow the Minister time to formulate the responses. When the Minister returned to present the answers, the meeting was adjourned again due to a lack of quorum. The Minister has returned today to Parliament to present the answers to the questions, which were submitted in writing prior to this meeting and can be found under IS 927, 2023-2024, dated July 15th, 2024. Hence today, this meeting. At this time, I would like to give the floor to the Minister of Public Housing, Spatial Planning, Environment and Infrastructure, Mr. Patrice Gums, for his presentation of the answers. Minister, you have the floor.
Parliament, listeners in the Tribune, online viewers, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I am joined today by my Chief of Staff, Mr. Rayon Peterson, and Policy Advisor, Mr. Luciano Nichols. Madam Chair, I submitted the responses to the questions posed in the meeting of July 4th last week, Friday. If necessary, I can begin by reading out these responses, and if not, I can briefly summarize the presentation from 2 weeks ago to give context to the MPs as well as to the public on the subject of this meeting. So I turn, yep, okay. So let me begin first with a brief summary. So I began my presentation explaining that the TNO report speaks of energy transition within the countries of Aruba, Curaçao, and Sint Maarten, and that within government, energy policy, and by extension, energy transition falls under the Ministry of TEAT. VROMI, in its role as the ministry in charge of infrastructure, is then responsible for ensuring adequate distribution. Consequently, focus was largely given on providing context to the report based on my experiences in foreign affairs. Support, of course, came from the Policy Department of VROMI as well as the Ministry of TEAT. The presentation was structured into 6 sections. The first section, an explanation as to what was or is TNO. In short, it's an independent research organization in the Netherlands. Section 2, the contracting of TNO with the Dutch Ministry of Economic Affairs and Climate, IZK, to support the Kingdom climate agenda. Section 3 focused on the climate agenda and its objectives to address the lack of structural funding to combat the impact of climate change. Section 4 of my presentation of July 4th focused on strategy to secure financing in line with our small island reality, which gave access to the SDA++ and the GROEI funds. Section 5 was the challenges in achieving energy transition and the information necessary for the TNO report, which were namely lack of coordinated approach to energy transition, competing and/or contradictory agreements being signed by government, and finally, the lack of critical information from GEBE. Finally, Section 6 of the presentation was on VROMI's role in supporting the transition towards sustainable energy in line with the National Development Vision and the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Madam Chair, I will now proceed with your indulgence in responding to the questions posed by the honourable members of Parliament during the meeting of July 4th. From MP Sarah Wescot-Williams, there was a question number 1, which she asked, update on the funding modalities for renewable energy. The response is, funding for the Caribbean parts of the Kingdom is secure, and access to the different modalities will come online in various phases between 2025 and 2026. Question number 2 from the Member of Parliament, Wescot-Williams, is the energy policy of 2014 currently being updated? My response, from the Ministry of TEAT, the updating of the energy policy has not officially begun, but discussions are currently ongoing with BTP, Bureau of Telecommunications and Post, to have them established as an energy regulator. Once this agreement is reached, BTP will come online as a member of the Standing Energy and Climate Committee, and focus will be given to reviewing the policy. Important to note is that the baseline established in 2014 is still valid. Question 3 from MP Wescot-Williams, where does VROMI stand with a plan for alternative energy? As indicated in the presentation, at the national level, VROMI is not in charge of alternative energy. This is part of the mandate of the Ministry of TEAT. However, to support the transition, VROMI is busy finalizing the implementation of a new building code and the zoning plan. With the zoning plan, we can, for example, outline technical regulations for the use of solar panels. Moreover, VROMI can support the transition by amending building permits for large developments to have a percentage of their energy needs come from renewable sources. Question number 4 from MP Wescot-Williams. What exactly is needed to realize net metering? And this is quite a long answer, so please bear with me. What needs to be done can be divided into legislative and technical measures. Legislative. Net metering is a billing mechanism that allows consumers who generate their own electricity using renewable energy sources, such as solar panels, to feed the excess electricity they produce back into the grid. This system enables customers to receive credit for what they generate, and they can add this back to the grid. However, because the law and the concession indicate that in principle, adding to the grid or in general, supplying electricity is forbidden unless there's a concession signed with the government. This concession is currently with GEBE. The exception in the law is made when electricity is used for own consumption, so individual, residential, small use. Therefore, in short, with the current law, everyone seeking to take part in net metering would, in theory, have to have a separate concession with government. On a technical side, from a technical standpoint, the grid would have to be updated to handle fluctuations in energy production associated with decentralized solar energy production. The TNO report mentions installing synchronous condensers to offset those fluctuations. MP Wescot-Williams' fifth question. Can you provide information on a plan that GB had for a solar park in town? The ministry is aware of 3 solar projects. The first, solar roofs, were proposed to cover the parking strips on the Walter Nisbet Road, commonly referred to as Pondfield Road, and we have no clear indication at this moment as to why this project never came to fruition. Project number 2, proposal for a solar roof over the APS parking lot adjacent to the government building. Solar park project number 3, solar panels on top of the booths in the festival village. In all 3 cases, there is no clear indication as to why these were not allowed, why these were not followed up on, or why they were stopped by the then administrations. And MP Wescott's 6th and final question, does CVROMI inform the developers? In doing the necessary research, we can conclude that there's limited communication with GEBE when it comes to the permits approved by CVROMI. While there is no explicit policy that makes this consultation a requirement, it is important to remember that GEBE's concession agreement requires notification to GEBE once a development reaches a certain level of consumption. Moreover, the responsibility of the Minister over Infrastructure and Spatial Planning should, to a responsible minister, trigger questions as to if existing infrastructure can support physical development. I'll repeat this again. While there is no explicit policy that makes this consultation, that is, between government and CVROMI, a requirement, it is important to remember that GEBE's concession agreement requires notification to GEBE once a development reaches a certain level of consumption. Moreover, the responsibility of the Minister over Infrastructure and Spatial Planning should, to a responsible minister, trigger questions as to if existing infrastructure can support physical development. This concludes MP Wescot-Williams' questions. I now turn to respond to the questions posed by MP Jacobs. MP Jacobs' first question: when was the climate agreement signed, and what was signed in 2023? The Kingdom Climate Agenda was signed in April 2024. What was signed in 2023 was a decision to collaborate on energy, which itself fed into the climate agenda. MP Jacobs' second question: looking at all the options on the table, how do we basically work with all the reports available in terms of the way forward? How are these being utilized by GEBE? All existing reports should be seen as the impetus, trigger, catalyst towards alternative and especially renewable energy. Government will be using these reports to update both the energy policy and concession agreement with GEBE. As mentioned by the now MP, in a press release dated April 3, 2024, GB agreed to take on the government's roadmap. And this, of course, as we know, relates to the grid market roadmap, which very quickly, to clear all sort of information around what that is, government contracted grid market back in 2017 or 18 to actually roll out this roadmap, to which was then approved finally in the previous Council of Ministers and is now, has been agreed by GEBE to be used to inform their steps moving forward within renewable energy strategy. So it's important to realize that this is something that has sort of came about way before the current or the last administration, and something that was actually founded by the organization. Continuing on, I repeat again, GB agreed to take on the government's roadmap, as well as to consider other recommendations in its strategic planning. In my most recent conversations with GEBE, this position has been reconfirmed. The next question comes from the MP, Christopher Emmanuel. His question was, when was the research for this report done, and when was it published? Was government aware of this report? The assessment was carried out between September and October 2023 and then published in April 2024. It is important to note that the report was not commissioned by government, but research was undertaken with the permission of and inclusion of the government. Therefore, knowledge of the report, the mandate of TEANO, and the objective of the report was known to government. As Minister of ROMI, I did my due diligence to review the report as it concerns not only my country, but an area for which, as Minister of ROMI, I am partially responsible. MP R12 had one question. The question was, is it true that funding was asked from the Netherlands regarding GEBE, and is this funding in jeopardy? The response, yes, funding has been requested, and as far as we are aware, it is not in jeopardy. MP Richenel Brugge had one question, and it's the final question posed to my person on the meeting of July 4th. In the TEANO report, Table 5 investment costs are not present for Sint Maarten. The MP asked why, and very short, the information for Sint Maarten isn't provided because all necessary information wasn't provided by the stakeholders who were interviewed in the assessment timeline. Madam Chair, this is the end of the response to the questions, and I yield the floor back to you.
Thank you, Minister Gums. I look to the digital speakers list, and I see MP Sarah Wescot-Williams has requested the floor. MP Wescot-Williams, you have the floor.
Thank you once again, Madam Chair Lady, and my thanks to the Minister for providing the answers to questions posed. Madam Chair Lady, at the beginning of this meeting, during notifications, we spoke about meetings that have not been timely held, or in some cases not held at all. So I want to just inform the Minister here present with us today that I have an outstanding request for our meeting of this committee to deal with the management of beaches and coastline and the applicability and scope of the Civil Code, Article 5.26, as well as the beach policy and moratoriums. That request, Madam Chair Lady, is dated the 17th of March, 2022. Madam Chair Lady, in connection herewith, I wish to bring another matter to the attention of the Minister. And that is the matter that I have been asking ministers of CVROMI, Minister of Finance even, and it regards the following. Madam Chair Lady, I happen to have picked up that a case was filed by the management of Mullet Bay, the current management of Mullet Bay, against the government of Sint Maarten. And so I asked, firstly, if that had taken place, and it was confirmed that a case was filed. So I asked the previous minister if I could receive the outcome of that case. So to the minister before us now, Minister, on the 15th of April of this year, I wrote the following to the Ministry of ROMI. In response to one of my questions posed during the budget debate regarding the court's decision in relation to Sun Resort Limited NV, you, so the minister then, provided by email of March 25th the judgment of the court dated February the 19th, 2024. However, this document, so the one that I received in answer to my question, the document refers to a judgment of the court of the 3rd of November, 2023. In the judgment provided, the court instructs the government to execute the court's decision of last November. In fact, the court, on the 19th of February, summoned the minister to comply with its decision of November the 3rd within 3 weeks after February 19th. So, while I received that, I have not received what the case was that was filed based on what the court rendered a judgment. So my question then, Minister, and I put it with you again, could you provide me with a judgment of November the 3rd, 2023 in the case of Sun Resort Limited NV versus the Minister of CVROMI? And then I also ask, on April the 15th of this year, has the minister executed the judgment of February 19, 2024? If not, why not? And if yes, when was it executed? I also ask, in connection with the court's verdict, and I don't have the verdict, that's what I would like to have, was a penalty imposed? And if so, for what amount? So, Minister, I just want you to know that in connection with the beaches and Mullet Bay and et cetera, apparently this was filed. And from what I understood, Minister, let's be candid, the management of Sun Resort asked the government of St. Maarten to clear off the Mullet Bay beach from all structures on the beach. That was the request. And the court made a decision that I would like to receive. And on the basis of that decision, the court earlier this year demanded that the government execute the decision. So, Minister, if you can please provide some clarity in this case so that we can understand what happened. And that is why I refer to my request for a meeting of 2022 regarding the management of beaches. Because, Minister, this matter is going to come very, very much into play when the matter of Mullet Bay, the sale or not, comes into question, especially where the beach is concerned. So, Minister, if you can please look into that for me and provide me with that information. And then, Minister, again, thank you for your answers. And so, Minister, the energy policy of 2014, while we have been informed here in Parliament that this policy was being updated, not that it was planning, the update was being planned, but that it was being updated. But from what I understand, and you were very clear, Minister, that updating has not started. Rather, discussions are taking place with BTP, et cetera. Minister, I care to inform you that as a member of Parliament, I was the one who raised the issue that in 2017, an agreement was signed with BTP regarding regulatory work for the utility company. I was informed by the Minister of TIAT when I brought this forward that he was unaware of this agreement with BTP, but would have looked into it. Minister, this was a agreement signed in 2017, and the Minister of TIAT, the former Minister of TIAT, was unaware, as he told Parliament, of this agreement. Now I'm understanding from you that this agreement has been reactivated, so to speak, and that the energy policy updating is being looked at in that context. You also made, through you, Madam Chair, Lady Minister, a very interesting observation, and that is that the baseline in this energy policy is still valid. So that would mean that GB, in pursuing whatever alternative energy sources, should strive, and this is my question, Madam Chair Lady, should strive to meet the goals in the energy policy of 2014 is a question. Is that what is meant with the baseline is still valid? And the Minister, Madam Chair Lady, referred to the issue of zoning. I could inform the Minister, and in this context, Minister, I want to remind you of my statement at the beginning of this meeting about getting answers from especially your predecessors, and questions outstanding from me still regard the matter of zoning. And Minister, tell me if I am wrong from what I understood the issue of zoning to be. There were zoning plans being developed, being drafted for the different areas on St. Maarten, amongst which one for Simpson Bay. For some of these zoning plans, community discussions were held with the communities, with the relevant communities. And then I learned that apparently these individual zoning plans will no longer be pursued. Is that so, Minister, or not? One big zoning plan, I was told, is going to be pursued for the entire island. Can the Minister of CVROMI, Madam Chair, Lady, please shed some light on the issue of zoning plans on St. Maarten? Are we still pursuing zoning plans for the different districts, or are we pursuing one big zoning plan? Minister, please respond to that as good or well as you can. Minister, thank you for that elaborate answer on the matter of net metering. And so I ask through you, Madam Chair Lady, the Minister, given what you've stated and what you know, how realistic is it to count on the possibility of net metering, and what time frame would you envision, given all of the technicalities you mentioned, for that to be possible? The matter of the concession of GB and some very important passages or clauses the Minister has referred to in this concession. Through you, Madam Chair Lady, can the Minister inform Parliament who, if anybody, is responsible for monitoring the compliance with the concession between the government and GEB? Is there such a monitoring taking place? And if not, when would that commence and how? And then, Madam Chair Lady, we get to the issue of grid market. And I'm learning now that GB has committed to use the roadmap of grid market. I asked in previous meetings if this roadmap, and I guess it's the roadmap towards alternative energy, and if the roadmap can be shared with the Parliament of St. Maarten. And if it cannot be shared, why not? Why can the roadmap not be shared? Madam Chair Lady, these are my questions that I look forward to hearing the Minister's responses on. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Wescot-Williams. Next on the digital speakers list, I have MP Duran. MP Duran, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. Thank you to the Minister for the responses given to the questions posed by MPs. I would like some clarity, though, because I heard the Minister mention that the energy responsibility for energy lies within the Ministry of TIAT. I know that that has been, through you, Madam Chair, that has been a long-standing discussion back and forth. In the energy policy that was submitted, published back in 2014, it reads, the Minister of Public Housing, Spatial Planning, Environment and Infrastructure has initiated the preparation of the National Energy Policy and the actions needed to move from a policy to implementation in order to move away from the use of diesel and heavy fuel oils to power the production for reasons of security of supply, price vitality, and environmental impact of emissions, with the ultimate goal to ensure that sustainable, affordable, and environmentally friendly energy solutions are here for St. Maarten. That is directly out of the energy policy. So I would like some clarification on that point. And lastly, in that same energy policy, it acknowledges persons that played an instrumental role in it. And I think that if Parliament is not privy to it, we should go, because it's all over, it's online, it's on the BTP website as well. Whereas for GB, you had the cabinet of the Minister of CVROMI, you had TIAT, and you had the Secretary General of CVROMI at the time, as well as a senior medewerker, which GB, you had Maduro, Benskop, Cathy, Hodge. Cabinet of the Minister of CVROMI, you had Janssen Webster, and you had J. Richardson. For Ministry of TIAT, you had M. DeWeaver and E. Rajuki. For VROMI, the Staff Bureau, you had Brown and Ms. Hoft. So I'm saying, through you, Madam Chair Lady, that this is nothing new under the sun. This is over 10 years old. I was only made aware of it, actually, I think in my last couple of months as Minister of VROMI, but the back and forth has always been where does the responsibility actually lie? And I would like some clarity on that, because it's something that we even brought forward to Yezetenwe. My next clarification point, through you, Madam Chair, I would like to know how many building permits have been signed since May 3rd to now, and what kind of developments are there? And did you receive permission from GB in order to approve these building permits? Because I've hearing the government championing, GB was never involved and GB never gave permission. And also, if the minister can highlight where in the building ordinance, so where is the prerequisite that GB needs to approve? Because I know the procedure all too well, Madam Chair Lady, where a building permit is applied for, it's evaluated, then it's approved and or denied based on the advice, based on the feasibility, etc. Of course, there's a whole lot of things that happen between then, where there's a correction letter and adjustments that are needed based on parking regulations, etc. So I would like to know if the minister can provide that clarity there, answer to that question. And I know that the minister has been a proponent of stopping large developments and halting everything. So I would like to know, why isn't there a major island-wide building stop if that is the case? Because it's unfortunate to be saying one thing on one end in terms of stopping development, but still approving building permits without the permission of GB, given the current energy crisis that we're facing. Because right now, we're at a capacity issue where we're trying to bring in extra engines to carry the load that we have right now. So I want to know if there's a current building stop, and when last have building permits been signed to put more stress on the grid. Thank you. I would like clarity on those points, and I thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, MP Duran. I give the floor to MP Jacobs.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Firstly, with your permission, Madam Chair, because I'm a little bit concerned or confused based on the topic or the agenda point for this meeting. I take note that a member of Parliament mentioned that she had unanswered questions, but those questions, as far as I could relate, had nothing to do with the agenda topic at hand. In terms of, even though it was via this committee, isn't it then to the chair to at least resend the questions, or how will this be reflected in the report of the committee? Because I'm not understanding from a chair perspective how we are incorporating questions unrelated to the topic in the finalization once this meeting is done. So I just need some clarity on that, one. So just to be clear also, is it so then, if this is allowed in terms of the rules of order, that we can then ask the Minister of VROMI anything under the sun that is of a concern for us, especially seeing that certain meetings aren't going to be had, and we get the opportunity to have him in front of us now. So just to be clear, I would like to know how we are proceeding with this meeting, and I'll give you opportunity to respond to that once I finalize my questions regarding the topic that have been answered by the Honorable Minister. So I turn now to the Minister through you, Madam Chair, and I ask, first of all, thank him through you for the responses to the questions and the needed clarity on the whole grid market issue, and that it was initiated by the government of St. Maarten. But I think I would need more clarity as to the year, because saying 16, 17 sounds a bit early for me. When we went in 2019, I got the impression that it came about as a result of visit to Samoa in 2019 itself. Earlier in 2019, when the Romeo cabinet sat. So I would like some clarity via the minister, through you, Madam Chair, as to when it exactly started. And I agree with a former member of Parliament who said, indeed, if the roadmap is now to that stage where you're, as government, looking at all of the different reports, since we have the TNO report, let us also as Parliament really investigate all of the reports that have been submitted, including the proposed roadmap. And if it has to be done via the confidential route, then so be it. But I believe that the Parliament should also, at this stage, have the opportunity to look at that, so that no longer we can hear the cry that it wasn't a priority of government or government didn't care about X, Y, or Z, including the environment. Because just to be clear as well, Madam Chair, I'm going to deviate here, and then you could correct me later, but yeah. The Corena project, which is related closer to what the Member of Parliament asked about, is the coral reef assessment, was something also initiated under the last government, which shows direct interest in how are we to deal with the impact of climate change on our environment, on our direct environment, so the coral reefs, so that steps can be taken to mitigate further damage as well as to fix the situation. And I saw in the paper today from the Nature Foundation that this project has been extended to December 2024, but just to ensure that the people of Sint Maarten understand, because that wasn't clear in the report, that this project has been ongoing for some time and has had the Resembit funding, etc., was actually secured via the Ministry of General Affairs on the buck and carried out by the Department of, the Policy Department of CVROMI in collaboration with Nature Foundation and other professionals. So I think, again, I'm all about transparency. I'm all about ensuring the public has a full picture. And so, yes, I'm happy to know that these projects, though seeming small to begin with, are so necessary so that we have the data and the decision can be taken at a later stage as to how we can actually address the challenges if indeed they can determine how much damage have been done to our coral reef and other water areas within St. Maarten. Madam Chair, I also, through you, have a clarifying a question that I would like the minister to clarify. I was happy to hear that the ongoing work on the building codes and zoning plan also include policies related, or something was mentioned then that I need clarity on, related to solar panels. I would like to know exactly what that is and how that goes hand in hand with GB and also battery storage, and how will it impact if more and more individuals, including the larger hotels, etc., do more of this on their own without any guidance or direction or legislation from government. How exactly will the amendments of building permits take place? Is it with current legislation, or will legislation need to be amended to allow for the building permits to be amended? So that was not clear to me in the minister's presentation, Madam Chair Lady. So through you, I would like some clarity on that. I was also pleased to hear that the access to the, in answering my questions, the minister clarified when the agreement for the collaboration happened in 2023 and when the climate agenda was signed in 2024, showing again the former government's commitment to forwarding St. Maarten's climate agenda along with that of the kingdom and the access to the SDE Plus and other funds. I'm happy to hear also that they will be coming online in 2025 and 2026. However, it is not clear to me in terms of when it was stated that the trip to the Netherlands was to be able to get funding for GEBE. Is that outside of this $200 million that has been made available for the Caribbean countries, Aruba, Curaçao, and St. Maarten? Or is it through another medium? And I would want to hope, since it is something for sustainable development and the transition to energy, that it would not be a loan, but more of a grant in line with what we have been discussing over the past year, year and a half with our Dutch colleagues. So some clarity is needed there through you, Madam Chair, from the Minister as it regards to was the funds that the Prime Minister went to seek to assist GB in line with these funds that will be coming online in 2025, 2026? Is it for the current assistance or is it for the long-term assistance for NVGEBE? And I'm also happy to hear that NVGEB has confirmed their commitment to work along with government's vision for the transition to renewable energy. Because I still get the impression, Madam Chair, and I hope the Minister can also clarify that they are quite reluctant to include it in their current plans for a year and a half, 2 years from now. So the longer term plans, for which they said in the previous meetings that it would require, if you have to reorder engines, I believe 7, 8, and 9, or I'm not sure which ones, but the 3 that need to be replaced, that are the oldest, if our transition plans would not allow for us to instead focus that 27 megawatts in alternative energy, and then if not, why not? Madam Chair, I believe that's all the clarity requested thus far via the Minister, but just for us to understand, if we can also now address other concerns that there are with the Ministry of CVROMI, if we can address these now, I will pause my questions to hear further from you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to resume if you have determined that we can. Yes? Thank you.
Thank you, MP Jacobs. And just to clarify a bit, MP Wescott did indeed state that she had some questions that she would be posing to the Minister. And indeed, the Mullet Bay question is a deviation from the topic. So I will leave it up to the Minister if he wants to answer that verbally, but he can also respond in writing, since I believe these are questions MP Wescott has asked a few times over the last term in writing. So I would leave that up to the Minister. So with that, I would also like to advise, let's have no further deviations from the topic, or I will also then ask the Minister to move forward. And just as a note as well, because I hear the reaction, Mullet Bay has been a topic of discussion in this building for quite some time. And I do believe that as a country, it does tie into how we can properly zone that very highly valuable area for us from an environmental perspective, all of which falls under climate change and resilience and would kind of blend in as well to this TNO report. But with that being said, I will move on to the next speaker, which is actually MP Sarah Wescot-Williams. However, there is someone that has, if you can all, I believe it's MP Marlin, you had your mic on. If you could push your card in and then just repress your mic, MP Wescott as well. Yes, sorry about that. So that I can see who is actually requesting the floor. Damn it. Sorry. MP Wescott, hit it again. Sorry, my bad. The system is being weird. Okay, MP Wescott, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. Madam Chair Lady, actually your concluding statement sort of tied into what I wanted to say and ask to the Minister as we continue on this discussion based on my very elaborate request for this meeting in my letter. And so through you, Madam Chair Lady, in order to understand what all would fall under the topic at hand, I would like to know from the Minister if the Minister is aware of the submission of the TNO report to the second chamber, and if he's aware of the content. Because in that content, one would see how many topics the very TNO writers as well as the Dutch minister have touched on. And zoning of this country is one of the topics. Mullet Bay property falls under the whole zoning issue. So, Madam Chair Lady, in my opinion, I understand very well how these topics fit under the topic that we are discussing. So I just want to know, firstly, if the Minister is aware of the submission of the TNO report to the second chamber. By the way, that presentation by the Dutch Minister, Madam Chair Lady, is booked in at Parliament. So all members of Parliament can take note of the submission of the TNO report. And in that report, all of the things that I mentioned here and more are addressed as part of the TNO report. So my questions are very much in line with the topic and my request for the meeting. But having stated that, Madam Chair Lady, and hope that is understood, because I continue to ask the Minister, in connection with your answer regarding grid market and GEBE now committed to grid market, so how does this relate to the yet to be received study by Energienautics? From my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, the results of Energienautics research will be available in September. So if the minister can just kind of put that together for us, or at least for me, how it all fits. And does the government currently have a vision on alternative energy? So should I look back at the energy policy of 2014 and conclude that this is the government's vision on alternative energy? I look forward to hearing the matter of developments and stopping, halting, whatever. I look forward to receiving that answer, because I would then have to ask the minister, the development, since we're talking about developments, that is supposed to take place at Bel Air. And when I asked about the material dump there, I was told it was to be removed the next week. That's about, I would want to say, 6 to 7 weeks ago. So if the minister could speak to that development, since we're talking about big and small developments, if the minister can confirm whether that material is permanent or it is, as we have been told by your predecessor minister, to have been removed a long time ago. And Madam Chair Lady, if you bear with me, those are some clarifications I would like the minister to give, and I still await expectantly the court verdict that I ask about in writing, verbally, WhatsApp to the minister. Every possible avenue that I could employ, I have employed to get answers. So I thank you, Madam Chair Lady, and the minister in advance.
Thank you, MP Wescot-Williams. MP Kotai, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon to all. To the minister here, thank you for being here with us. So just to lightly go back on grid market, when I brought it to the floor of Parliament, I asked 9 extensive questions that were very in-depth that I did not receive any answers for as of yet. That's one. Secondly, I agree with my fellow colleague MPs that we should be able to have, well, we should be able to see the roadmap. And just to double back for some clarity, it was said that in the past, GEBE did not provide information or documents to grid market, and this is the reason why they haven't moved forward. Although you did just mention, Minister Gums, that GEBE is in agreement of such roadmap. So just some clarity for myself over there as well. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Kotai. MP Jacobs, you request the floor.
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you for the opportunity. I did not take the opportunity when you had mentioned that the faction, National Alliance faction, had received responses. You mentioned the UVs, and indeed we did receive responses, Madam Chair, responding to our urgent public meeting to discuss and amend Budget 2024. And to the end of that, it mentioned that it would be rescheduled. A solution for such would be found during the recess. I would like, Madam Chair, if through you could forward the information to the CRIFI, through the CRIFI and the Chair of Parliament, that we would like some more specific information, because a budget amendment, I'm hearing a lot of things regarding budget amendment which could negatively impact the operations, the subsidies, and more. And so I would want to hope that this has the urgent attention of the Council of Ministers to be handled in the shortest possible time. So that is in regards to that statement. And yes, we have received the TNO report, we have received all the responses, but we would not be wasting the people's time, nor yours, Madam Chair, if we felt that the responses received gave any further clarity as to when those meetings would be held. So it's still very much up in the air. We would like those meetings to be handled with the urgency that is required. And as it regards the reports, I look forward to a proper, let's say, comparison from government, because I believe I asked this in the meeting where Prime Minister Marcelina was and not in this meeting, but that question related to we have these reports, where are we going? The response that the minister just gave was still very much vague. Happy to know that the Energy and Climate Work Group are working, and now also that BTP will be included or is included. But what does that actually mean in terms of a timeline? Especially seeing the crisis we're in, we have a short-term measure. Where are we going in terms of getting the long-term strategic plan of GB? How does it align with the roadmap? How does it align with the TNO reports and others? And is the ministry, since we've had that discussion, and I heard the former minister and now MP ask for further clarity regarding the collaboration with NVGEBE, I thought it was already clear that since major construction requires some 2 years and more to be finalized, and that they require meters for the construction itself, that GEBE is already made aware. Is the ministry and or the policy department planning to implement a stricter policy in terms of collaboration with NVGB earlier in advance once the permit has been requested? Yes or no? I would like that along with the answers as were requested by my colleague regarding stop, don't stop, based on the situation or not. It's also not clear to me, Madam Chair, whether, because I did notice, at least in my area, a little less load shedding already taking place. Is it something that is happening across the island? And or is it a situation that whether there was an issue with the crankshaft or whatever the story was, the people need more information. And I think between NVGB and the Council of Ministers, as well as the Minister of CVROMI, these should be addressed on a regular basis so that people have an idea on the way forward, especially now, dealing with the constant challenges that the general public is feeling, Madam Chair Lady. I think that's it for now, and I thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, MP Jacobs. Just to respond to the request for more specific info on the UVs received and those pending meetings, as I mentioned earlier, will, in further discussion between Secretariat and the President of Parliament, I believe that those meetings right now, scheduling of them is being discussed with the Council of Ministers or with the relevant ministers, and we should have some more information about that this week. With that, I will move on to MP Brug, because prior to the debacle with the card, he had actually signed in first before MP Marlin. So MP Brug, you have the floor.
All right. Thank you, Chair Lady. Considering that in your statement you stated that GB has agreed to the roadmap, can I conclude that at this point it means that an investment cost is now established? And if the answer is yes, what is the amount and can that be shared with Parliament? In addition to that, in which report can this breakdown be found? And also again, can this also be shared with Parliament? That's the end of it. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Brug. MP Marlin, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I have a specific question. When? The question is when. When will the sinkhole or the Colby Hill Road, when will this be fixed? I'm glad that we have the Minister of CVROMI in front of us today. It's a question I've been posing, and I would like
Sorry, that
Yeah.
is wildly off topic.
No, it's not off topic. I heard.
The
there are
TNO
several-
report deals with energy. If you were asking a question about streetlights and the impact of GB on such, I would allow it. But this is now
Madam
strictly
Chair,
on the
since we
energy and
have
the
the
TNO
Minister
report
of
and zoning.
CVROMI
I
here
understand.
today, and seeing that the
Understood.
other ministers is hiding and ducking and
Understood,
giving off an
100%.
excuse
But
to come on
MP
the floor of
Marlin,
Parliament to talk. So since I have the minister right here in front of me, I don't think it's a hard question to answer. The people want answers. We talk about transparency. We have the minister right here in front of us.
understood.
So I would like
but
to
I know the
use-
minister has also provided an
I think
update
you
in
should
press
give him the
briefing,
opportunity to, in his press briefing as well.
which is
he
viewed
mentioned,
by
he mentioned
the
about
public.
doubling the roads,
MP
doubling
Marlin.
the thickness of the roads, and he's the minister of CVROMI. So I would
MP
like
Marlin,
answers.
I would hate to have to quote a former colleague in here, but
New chair, new rules.
I've not given you the word to continue. So, with that, I believe the
Again, I
minister
must use what I hear from one of my colleague MPs, dictatorship. One word, dictatorship.
Thank you, MP Marlin. If there are no questions related to the TNO report, with that, I will take just a brief 2-minute adjournment. So meeting adjourned for 2 minutes. Welcome back. After that brief adjournment, I would like to ask MP Marlin if he has any questions related to the topic. However, he stepped out of the hall. And just for the edification of the public, the listening public, I'd like to state that, yes, indeed, we're all representatives in here of the people, but we are provided the word by the chair of the committee and or central committee or the public meetings. So in that regard, it is at the discretion of the chair to keep the meeting on topic. And as I stated earlier, there would be no further slight deviations based on the slight deviation of Mullet Bay earlier in the meeting. I don't see anyone else signed in on the digital speakers list, so I would look to the minister to ask how much time he would require to respond to the question. I see MP Duran with another question.
Yeah. Yes, Madam Chair. Thank you. I'll just to expound on the question that I posed earlier for clarification's sake. Can you give, for clarity of the general public, Madam Chair, to the Honorable Minister, when someone applies for a building permit and it's approved, so now we pass the process, it's approved, right? They then go to GB for a construction meter, because the talk has always been about large developments. Can you give some clarification if then GB is not notified of said project, whether it takes 2 years, 1 year, or 3 years to be built? Then in that case, they would then know in advance if the project is coming online. That would be all, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Duran. So I would look to the minister regarding how much time he would require to begin answering the questions. Minister?
Yep, thank you, Madam Chair. I think we would need about 45 minutes. Yep.
All right, 45 minutes. So that will bring us back at 5:30. So I will adjourn until 5:30. Meeting adjourned. Welcome back to the members of parliament, members of this committee of ROMI. After that adjournment, I look to the minister and give him the floor to begin answering the questions and comments of the members. Minister, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'll first begin with the questions of MP Sarah Wescot-Williams. The first question was, there's an outstanding request to deal with management of beaches and coastlines dated March 17th, 2022. And the question is, can this meeting be honored? And indeed, MP Wescot-Williams, upon request, we will honor that meeting once it arrives. The second question related to the court case, and in very short, Sun Resort NV versus the Minister of ROMI. The MP elucidated to a number of things, and to which we will very quickly, quite a long answer. I will give the answer to the question. Through you, Madam Chair, I will give an elucidation of this court case for clarity's sake, as I don't want information to be lost in translation, and they go very slowly. On November 3rd, 2022, 2023, apologies, a verdict was handed down to the Ministry of ROMI. This concerned a simple LOB request, a request for information from the ministry. The request by Sun Resorts was to receive the information on all rental agreements and approved building permits for the area of the Mullet Bay Beach. The then administration did not show up for the court case, so the judge ruled in favor of Sun Resort and instructed government at the time to present the requested information within 3 weeks. Unfortunately, Madam Chair, this was not done on time and actually has not been done at all. On the 19th of February, 2024, the judge handed down yet another verdict for this same information request. This means that up to then, the ministry did not respond to the request at all. The verdict of February 19th, 2024, ruled that the government had yet another 3 weeks to answer the LOB request. And if not, after that risk, a dwang sum, or a fine, of 500 guilders per day with a maximum of 50,000 guilders per day would be imposed. Unfortunately, Madam Chair, none of this was enough to move the previous minister to deliver the requested information, and thus government now has to pay that fine. When this administration came in, the cabinet at the time was made aware of this case. We prioritized the case and got into contact with the lawyers of Sun Resort to come to an agreement to hopefully deliver the requested information and maybe agree on something for an already issued dwang sum fine that we at that point had already owed. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, the amount was 27,000 guilders at that point. The government would have had to pay because of the lack of response. I can share with you, MP Wescot-Williams, through you, Madam Chair, that on the 26th of June of this year, a day after I sworn in, the Department of Domain Affairs delivered the requested information to the lawyers of Sun Resorts. And since then, we have been in contact with them for any other relevant information that they may need. This again shows, Madam Chair, that these court cases were put on the back seat for a very long time by the previous Minister of ROMI, and we are doing damage control to make sure that the country doesn't suffer any more loss and damages from the previous way that things were handled. MP Wescott's third question. Energy policy updated has not been updated. The negotiations with BTP to be regulator. The MP alluded to her involvement in the establishment of the regulatory work, and that the last Minister of TEAT indicated on the floor of Parliament that he was not aware of such an agreement or discussions. Indeed, MP, through you, Madam Chair, contradictory to what was mentioned by the previous administration, updating the energy policy has not yet commenced. Is the energy baseline still valid? Should that be where the government should strive to reach? The baseline is still valid as no investments have been made to change the status quo regarding energy infrastructure. In my presentation of July 4th, I mentioned that the energy concession given to GB calls for 2% renewable energy. While we are currently at 0% renewable, 2% is far below regional benchmarks for renewable energy. As such, the 2% is not where we should aim to be in the long term, but should be therefore seen as the preliminary short-term goal. The MP's following question, individual zoning plans no longer being pursued and why? Indeed, the intention is to merge the 13 plans into 1 or 2 plans for the island. For instance, 1 zoning plan for built-up areas and 1 for conservation natural areas. One of the main reasons for this change, Madam Chair, through you, is that the development of the country needs to be executed from an integrated and holistic point of view. In addition, bringing 13 separate plans to Parliament has proven to be unrealistic due to the long legislative process. Work on this plan is in its early stages, with capacity already identified as being one of the key factors in making this plan a reality. To that end, the ministry is diligently working on recruiting personnel. Going down. In the short term, the ministry is still using and advising based on the 13 separate plans to ensure proper spatial planning, which is in the interest of the entire island. With regards to the areas mentioned by the MP, i.e. Mullet Bay, Kupakoy, and Simpson Bay, these areas do have the attention of the ministry, as in some instances, they lack the necessary infrastructure to support the type of developments that have been allowed in the past. This needs to be considered to responsibly develop these areas going forward. Net metering. And I believe this is still MP Wescot, yes, indeed. How realistic is it possibly to rely on net metering, and what is the given time? MP, through you, Madam Chair, that is an answer that we can and should provide without, this is not an answer that we can and should provide without the input of GEBE, as net metering impacts the infrastructure that's not currently there. Concession monitoring compliance. Is this monitoring taking place? And if not, when will it commence and how? According to Article 1 of the National Ordinance regulating the concessions, it is the Minister of CVROMI who in theory regulates the concession, and to that extent, the concession agreement. Whether or not that has been done the last couple of years is a good question, because the concession agreement has several regulations in it that we all know have not been followed. Like, for example, when it comes to solar energy or any forms of alternative energy. So, through you, Madam Chair, I will gather the actual update for you and I'll provide that in writing. That ends, MP Westcott's questions. We now go to the question of MP Egbert Duran. Responsibility of TEAT, the National Energy Policy. Whose responsibility is it? In my presentation, I indicated that energy policy falls under TEAT, but that the distribution of said energy is responsibility of Minister of CVROMI. Therefore, it's an interministerial domain that needs to be led by TEAT and supported by CVROMI. Other ministries, including, for example, AZ, play and have played a role as it relates to the National Development Vision and how the energy plan ties into the bigger country's agenda. How many building permits have been signed since May 3rd? And what permission was sought by GEBE, and how many were large-scale developments? Approximately 45 permits, and out of that 45, none of these permits are what you would consider a large-scale development. What we have been focusing on are mostly small-scale developments that focus on residential areas, because we are very aware of the current GB crisis. It's also very important to realize that though approving building permits for small amounts can, of course, add up to being a large amount, it is the reality that someone needs a house much more and more pressingly than they need a large-scale development. And for that, we can justify why those permits have been approved to go ahead. What we can say is that going a little bit back into the last couple of months, the last, to our opinion, medium to large-scale development that was approved was for 58 condominium developments on a property in a residential area that only allowed a maximum of 3 units according to the deed. This building permit was approved on December 28, 2023. No permits close to that date, close to that big of a scale, has been approved by this current administration. MP Duran also asked about clarity on what I, as the minister, apparently has stated as a building stop, and which articles of the building code are being used for involving GEB in the process, as being mentioned in the media several times. Let me just begin by clarifying, never have I stated that there is going to be a building stop. For some reason, that seems to be a story that's floating around by some members. What I can say is that there is no more carte blanche or free-for-all on large-scale developments either, especially given that GB crisis we are currently facing. What this administration has done is to sit down with GEBE to see how we could assist in being part of the solution and not adding to the problem. What has been going on up to now is that regardless of how large the development is, GB has no notification from CVROMI. We can clearly see the results of not doing this, and this is affecting the whole island at the moment. There might not be necessarily a legal obligation, but we have to recall the concession agreement. Apologies, just scrolled too fast. Yep, sorry? Yes. So, while there are no legal obligations within the building permit process to inform GEBE, these are mentioned in the concession agreement as the responsibility of the government to inform GEBE of, as I mentioned in my presentation, of developments that have a certain amount of consumption tied to them. So long story short, what you have to do is not work in isolation. So the building permit doesn't require it, but your concession agreement, to which the same minister is responsible, has to then report when it goes above a certain amount of consumption. Yep, very briefly actually, in Article 7 of the concession agreement, and I'll base it here, it regulates that GEBE actually has the authority to deny a development that is going to burden the grid with a voltage of 1,000 kilovolt amps, which roughly translates to approximately 1 megawatt. So again, while there is no responsibility to involve GEBE in your permit request process, the same Minister of CVROMI who regulates the concession agreement has to inform GEBE of an agreement that goes, of a development that goes above a certain amount. Based on this, we decided to have a discussion with GEBE to see how we can be proactive in our approach moving forward and to not put a bigger strain on the grid than is needed. In this discussion with GEBE, we came to an agreement to give GEBE a notice of building requests that near the voltage of 0.5 megawatts, which is half of 1 megawatt. This was done on the proposal from GEBE themselves. This does not mean that GEBE has the authority to stop a development, but it's simply to give GEBE the opportunity to assess, give us advice, and if necessary, to prepare for an additional strain to the grid, which is part of what the Ministry of CVROMI is supposed to do, infrastructure and spatial planning. Up to now, GEBE told us how they used to find out about big developments are in one way, simply put, driving around themselves and seeing it happening on the road. Instead, we are trying to assist GB rather than find excuses to give them less information and towards sustainable development for Sint Maarten. MP Jacobs, can we get clarity on the dates related to the grid market? And let me very quickly just confirm. Apologies, bear with me. Yeah. Perfect. Indeed, grid market was discovered in 2018 following the participation of civil servants at a UN meeting in Samoa under the then Leona Marlin government. Discussions began, I can tell you because I was part of that delegation, discussions began about signing an agreement, but unfortunately governments fell. The current agreement with grid market was signed by the Silveria Jacobs government. As mentioned in my presentation, some of the challenges faced by TNO were also faced by grid market. These challenges include the lack of coordinated approach to energy, competing and contradictory agreements signed by government, and lack of information from GEBE. Upon signing the agreement, the lack of coordinated approach in particular to energy was one of the biggest challenges to have it, one, be one solid government direction, and two, to be supported across by different stakeholders. MP Jacobs' second question, the statement, the impression being given that nothing was done by the article on Corena, apologies, the impression being given is that nothing was done by the previous administration, but the article in today's paper on Corena only confirms the actions taken by the previous administration. Through you, Madam Chair, if read properly, the press release drafted by the Nature Foundation speaks of an amendment, not of a new agreement. It actually gives credit to the previous agreement made by the previous administration. It is important to note, though, that signing agreements alone isn't enough to protect the environment. True protection comes from dedicating the necessary human and financial capacity to fulfill policy decisions. From the Energy Work Group Committee, we have understood that under the last administration, what this policy would be is unclear, as there were contradictory agreements made by the government. The MP's third question, solar panel zoning, how does this go hand in hand with GEBE? Do more of it of our own, amendments of building permits, and I'm paraphrasing shorthand here, apologies, and current legislation, is it enough or do we need new legislation? Very quickly, Madam Chair, the TNO report actually advises on decentralized solar energy, whereas GEBE actually wishes to maintain centralized solar production. So basically, GEBE produces the energy themselves and feeds it back into the grid, whereas TNO recommends a decentralization of it, that i.e. everyone has solar panels on their house, which can then be fed back into the grid. Based on what we spoke about in the earlier presentation, if indeed the idea is to allow a decentralized grid, we would actually change legislation because currently it's not allowed to persons to produce above 500 kVA, and you'd have to actually then allow that to be fed back into the meter by changing existing policies and regulations. Okay. And then also too, I think what we have to do in that sense is also to piggybacking back on one of the questions that was asked earlier is about how do we tie this all together. I think I'd rather address that actually later on, so I'll move on. Quickly, MP Jacobs also asked the question, the trip to the Netherlands for funding grant, is it in line with what the fund, was it in line with the TNO report? It's important to indicate that the funding request, the trip to the Netherlands was also included a funding request for the generators and the long-term energy plans for the country. And of course, it is not in line with TNO simply because TNO is about renewable energies. The main objective of this period now is to just keep the lights on. But I'll extrapolate more on that in another question coming up in the series of questions. Okay. And then MP Jacobs also asked, transition plan, focus the fund. Long story short, why not focus the funds on alternative energy versus the 27 megawatts that are missing? While this current administration would have preferred to invest the funds in alternative energy, the lack of concrete plans for renewable energy means that to fill the immediate needs of the people, we had to work with what we have. Unfortunately, 17 days isn't enough to create such a plan. Going back, MP Wescot-Williams asked another question related to, yes, mediation between grid market, GEB situation, and how far are we essentially with the agreement. As well as, are we aware of the submission of the report of TNO to the second chamber? Indeed, yes, we are. It was mentioned in my presentation. The Energietics reports coming out in September. So one of the things that we have done in the very short term is that we have managed to have GBE, this is me as Minister of ROMI, GEBE and Grid Market will come together to sit down upon the publication of the report, where they will see how they can actually work together in aligning. It's important to note, and I'll bring it up too, that there actually is no, well, next question, I'll go on to it. MP Kutai, as well as MP Richnel Broek, asked about the following: grid market, can we see the roadmap? Also, the same question from MP Brugge about the amount of investments that need to be made. MP Wescot-Williams also asked similarly, can she see the roadmap? Very important to realize that in my statement I said, GEBE has agreed to take on the roadmap. If we will recall from the earlier presentation, information from the grid market roadmap, information to complete the roadmap, just like information to complete the TNO report, were not available. So there is no roadmap currently. Let's make that very clear. There is no roadmap currently to be shared. The agreement is essentially that GEBE and Grid Market will sit down and then discuss how to move forward in sharing information, developing a joint plan. MP Jacobs had the following question. Yes, a proper comparison of the reports. Response from the minister remains vague. What is the timeline, short-term, long-term? I think it's very important to realize that upon this government taking office, we were faced with the GB crisis. Very early on to actually orientation week. So a lot of time was spent first on orientation, then followed on dealing with the GB crisis. As you can imagine, the focus now has been trying to keep the immediate needs fulfilled. And of course, there is a long-term plan, like we said, to also start addressing the energy policy. We're also awaiting GB's report from Energietics, and all of that will feed into basically what government decides to do. On that note as well, I'd like to also stress the request about if government and the ministry are planning stricter enforcement of policy. As indicated previously, the policy has always existed. Unfortunately, was never enforced. So yes, indeed, we're going to not necessarily create a new policy. We're just actually going to, for the first time, follow the rules. There we go. And then MP Marlin asked regarding the culvert. When will it be fixed? And Before I get to that, let me just first actually go back to MP Duran's other question, because then that's sort of a, what I'll do, I'll answer all the questions related to the actual TNO report, and then I'll also address, because I can understand it's a growing concern in the community, that culvert question. And then MP Duran had one final question. So clarity, when someone applies for building permit and it's approved permit, what is the process? I think we very briefly spoke about it, but I'll be more elaborate. Okay, so yes, in theory, after the permit is approved, a GB meter is requested. However, if we are looking at a responsible decision-making, why would we subject GB to a situation where the building permit has already been approved to only then give the opportunity to assess the situation? That is setting GB up for failure. Also, okay, yep, not every project or construction uses a temporary meter. Some have generators and huge water containers. This means that in many cases, only after the whole project is complete do you get to find out what the actual needed voltage for the project is. This cannot be assessed correctly by GB before the fact. Thus, giving them a heads up not only helps them in their planning, but also gives them the opportunity to approach the developers before it reaches to a point of no return. And then finally, did I miss every other question? No, okay. And then finally, yes, MP Marlin, your question on the culvert. So I'll give I sort of discussed this very briefly in press briefing, I think a week ago, where clarifying several things. One, the hole on AGC Brow Road, Coal Bay Hill, is not a sinkhole. It's actually a damaged culvert. What is a culvert? A culvert basically is a below road surface way of channeling water off the road and out into be dispersed. The culvert, the initial proposal for the culvert was that we would repair the culvert by forming a mole and then digging up the road and having basically a very long period of time where the road would have to be open, and it's quite costly. Upon taking office, I asked to have that reviewed, given the cost and given the, the very obvious hindrance that would cause to traffic flow. And I decided, upon as well advice from the organization, that maybe it's best to actually look at, one, condemning the existing culvert, realizing that the existing culvert naturally channeled the water over into the now Indigo project neighborhood. So condemn that culvert, and then also look at building a new drainage directly opposite to it, as well as reinforcing the hill. I mentioned as well, this is a major part of why we need to establish the road fund, because we keep building roads without actually anything to support the maintenance of said road. In the process of getting the approval for the culvert, we realized that the emergency fund is only 5,000 Antillean guilders. This does not allow for costly repair emergencies, and this has been presented to previous administrations to be increased and has not been done. As such, what has had to happen is we are now at the point where we're getting the final advice to condemn the current sinkhole for the short term, as I mentioned a week and a half ago, and then as well finalize the new request for a new drainage and proper infrastructure on the hill due to the lack of maintenance over the years. In terms of a timeline, we are finalizing those discussions now with the contractor, and the bids should be arriving in this evening, which actually should be there now, and then that will be sent on for approval by tomorrow morning. Important to note is that we have been, of course, inspecting the road. There are, of course, I think, public concerns about the road collapsing, oftentimes politicization of things that I think, unfortunately, in this season are necessary, but rest assured that this administration, though very short in power, has made necessary adjustments to do things the right way. And we ask Sint Maarten to realize that we are doing our best, and we will see the results of that effort very shortly. And with that, Madam Chair, I have no further responses, and I yield the floor back to you.
Thank you, Minister. I look to the digital speakers list. If you could turn off your mic, Minister, sorry.
Yep.
And I see MP Jacobs requesting the floor. MP Jacobs, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon to one and all once again. Thank you for the responses. Through you to the Minister, albeit I can detect the politicking isn't only on the MP side, but granted, we are in the season, so granted that you will have your responses and that's your purview. But Madam Chair, there was, I need to make a clarification based on a response given to one of my questions. It mentioned that I asked whether the trip was about the TNO report or something like that. And to my recollection, the question was asked as to whether the trip was to access the SDE funds for NVGEBE, which should, according to what the minister presented earlier, be accessible 2025, 2026, or was it for something immediate, like the generators or whatever the case may be? So I believe the minister and or his staff may have taken down the question incorrectly, so clarification as to that, please and thanks. And also to clarify, Madam Chair, the minister himself started his presentation stating that NVGEBE was willing to work with Grid Market on its roadmap or the roadmap commissioned by government, and which in the past we have stated was approved by government. So now to state that it is not a roadmap, it doesn't exist, is somewhat, if not outright, contradictory. So I would really need some type of clarification there, because for a fact, I know that a roadmap was approved. I also mentioned from the beginning that it was missing some key information, so parts of it were extrapolated, which was GB's information. TNO report clearly also missing key GB information, and understanding that, yes, they were going through crisis at the time, and now again, that could be excused to some extent, but happy to know that they're willing to sit at the table now. However, if the statement is that the roadmap, as has been presented thus far, cannot be shared until GB's had its input, then that needs to be clarified better, because that's not what I got from the statements of the Honorable Minister. So that I would like also clarified, Madam Chair, with your agreement or with the Minister's, if he's able to clarify. And I especially enjoyed hearing previous administrations, because definitely the challenges that have existed with our road systems, etc., is not a 4-year problem. And we have only just recently, approved capital expenditure funds which included for the road network. Before that, it has been a 10-year span as to not only not having a road fund, but also not having capital expenditures or the opportunity to get capital expenditures based on the multiple disasters we faced, as well as the multiple changes in government. So I'd like, through you, Madam Chair, any clarity that can be provided in that regard, and thank you for the opportunity to have the floor.
Thank you, MP Jacobs. I will just let you take all the questions, Minister, and then you can answer as you need to. Next, we have MP Duran.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. I would like to thank the Minister for some of the answers provided, although some were not completely answered. So I'll just delve into the clarifications on some. With respect to the question that was posed by MP Wescot-Williams regarding the court case, you mentioned through you, Madam Chair, that the lawyer didn't show up to the court case, or the minister didn't show up to the court case. Just for clarity's sake, ministers don't show up to court case. We have vast representatie, which is the landsadvocaat. And in special cases, we can mandate a special designated lawyer to handle certain cases. So I would like clarity from the minister through you, Madam Chair, as to who didn't show up to that court case. And it's so amazing that certain points that not even requested are being answered here, but other things that are brought forward are not. So I'd like to know as well, because since we're talking about court cases and different things, I've seen a lot of court cases be settled. Alegria was a court case that I fought tooth and nail to secure the patrimony of Sint Maarten. I realized, though, in another instance, we were also battling something in court where the minister, I think it's the same day he took office, had to be because the article came out that day, went and basically signed off the decree for Maho. And I have yet to hear the minister publicly address that point because I brought it forward several times, and it was disguised as though, the country will benefit and make money on it. But I have something to add to that. Someone lost their job at Cadastre for falsifying information. So was a thorough investigation done prior to signing this? Because it's a reason that it was not signed.
Duran, this, again, if we could keep the clarifications and the questions to the TNO
Madam
report.
Chair, we can be sometime-ish because I'm talking about court cases, so I delve into that. The minister brought up certain points, so I'm just delving into that.
That was
Thanks
based
for your
on
indulgence.
MP Wescott's question, which I had already said the minister could have answered in writing if he wanted.
So maybe you could answer this in writing as
outside of
well.
the topic. So with that being also kind of outside of the topic, I would say you can submit that question in writing to the minister.
No, but this is a floor of Parliament, Madam Chair, whereas the minister is hearing the question.
Yes, but as the chair, I've already stated that we will no longer deviate that
okay, when it's
wildly. The
convenient.
culvert question, the minister graciously answered already, which he could have also chosen to answer in writing. So if there are questions related to building permits, etc., I believe the question on building permits pertain to the TNO, well, to the GB situation. One moment. So if there are questions you have pertaining to GB, energy, TNO, grid market, etc., then those questions I will allow.
But
Do
he
you have
answered
questions
question
related to
off
that?
the topic, so I'm just touching based on what the minister,
I
Madam
think he
Chair.
was elucidating on the question of
He-
how many
that's
building
a lot
permits
of
have been
elucidation
signed.
for about 3 minutes.
Well,
So I'm,
thorough answer to the question. So are there questions related to the topic?
everything is related to the best interest of the people of St. Maarten that I ask on this floor, Madam Chair Lady.
Understood. But in terms of the topic of TNO, are there questions related to GB, energy, etc.?
I was making a statement. Maybe if I was allowed to finish, then I will definitely touch on the point because all my questions are related to the point.
All right.
Thank you. So as I mentioned just now, just to finish that point before I get in trouble again, you were able so quick to sign off the land for Maho, which was something that was a whole investigation. Someone lost their job for that. And no due diligence, in my opinion, could be done within 1 day, which are extra I think thousands of square meters was allocated. So please clarify that in writing, as the chair mentioned. And I think that since we're mentioning a lot of things that you're doing differently, it's also important to keep the facts when it comes to, the grade and the handling of the grade and so forth. Reason I'm saying that is because you mentioned that 45 building permits were assigned for small homes. What's a small development? What quantifies a small development? 3 bedrooms, 5 bedrooms, 10 bedrooms? Because a lot of small development adds up to a boutique hotel. So I would like some clarity where that is concerned. And question is, point blank, was GB consulted prior to these building permits being signed? Yes or no? Because the minister, through you, Madam Chair, gave a nice fancy story, went to Marigot, come back with the answer, but still didn't answer that clear-cut question. What I heard later down in the answers, Madam Chair, is that the minister mentioned that GB has received certain information for certain building permits that seem to be kind of big, but they cannot decide if the building permit is approved, yes or no. And then in the end mentions that we have to do things responsibly, so that responsible decision-making cannot cause GB to come behind after the thing is done already. But then that's basically contradiction, but it doesn't surprise me because has been the MO of the current administration. I've heard previous administration, I think maybe 150 times during the answering of 20 questions. So I'll just highlight the current administration. When it comes to stopping large developments, Minister, I want to be clear through you, Madam Chair. This has been the stance of your party. I don't know if you don't know it or not, but this has been the stance of the PFP. And even going back to a couple meetings that I had where I was sitting in that seat, where they mentioned, can we consider stopping large-scale developments, which ties into this whole GB saga according to them. So you're currently a minister representing a particular platform. So my question to you is pretty clear. Do you believe in enacting a building stop? Will you? Is it in the pipeline? Is it being considered, given our current state of affairs? That is my question. So if it wasn't clear before, that is a question. And also, to piggyback on my previous point, if GB was consulted, can it be provided how they were consulted? Was it, an email, a letter, a WhatsApp? Just give some clarity on that, on how the permission or how the discussion took place with GB for these 45 building permits that you mentioned. Again, just to give the general public some information, because I think that when you play with words, it kind of confuses our population, and I try my utmost to be as transparent as possible, although I know the process. I have never seen any large-scale construction take place on Sint Maarten with the use of a generator. Let's be real. We have engineers here in this room. We have some that fathers are engineers, and everybody around here know an engineer. And I've never seen a project take place with a generator, a large-scale project. I mean, Bob Marley say, you could fool some people sometime, but you can't fool all the people all the time. Let's not try to insult the intelligence of our populace that are tuned in right now, and let's just keep it a buck in terms of clarification, because at the end of the day, the misinformation that is out there, it really confuses people, and I think that it is high time to just be transparent in terms of bringing the message across. And I want to also emphasize the fact that in the beginning of this whole GB crisis, since we're talking about energy, I came with certain solutions from the beginning. So it was not 2 weeks, 3 weeks. It's from the beginning I indicated, hey, guys, badge is a possible option, containerized generator. I even gave information to the government as to where I got my information, because I was privileged to attend the Carolec conference with GEBE, and I indicated, listen, GEBE definitely has the contact information. I am not going to go and say, hey, listen, check with this company, check with that company, as some coalition partners that sit in the front have done. But I'm just saying that the solutions are there. We don't need to reinvent the wheel, because at that time, through you, Madam Chair, to the Minister, certain regional partners were dealing with similar crises, and hence the reason why experience is the greatest teacher. So when you hear their stories is why I came with those solutions. Up to yet, I have to get a response, or I did receive a letter, but it wasn't really too clear as to the direction. I was glad when I saw the Prime Minister came with the solution for the containerized generators, because that was the point that was brought forward initially. But you know the term a day late and a dollar short, because so much businesses have suffered so much loss based on waiting so long to make a decision. And I try to hope and I pray for the day that in Sint Maarten we will come to the point where it's not just about who comes with the idea, but if the idea is solution-oriented, if the idea can fly, let's do it for our people. Madam Chair, I look forward for the clarification on the questions and clarifications that I requested, and I thank you for the opportunity and your indulgence as well.
Thank you, MP Duran. Next, MP Wescot-Williams.
Thank you once again, Madam Chair Lady, and a very good evening. Thank you, Minister Gums, for your responses, and in particular for your response regarding the court case filed by Sun Resort to get information based on the LOB. In that context, Madam Chair Lady, through you, I want to ask further clarification from the minister and whether this information that eventually was provided, if that information was anonymized. And I ask this for the simple reason that in the past, when members of parliament asked for similar information, the information given to parliament was anonymized. So I asked myself if in complying with the court verdict and the LOB, whether this information to Sun Resort was also done in that fashion. And Madam Chair Lady, I want to express a concern in connection herewith, and that concern is what part of, or if any, of the beach at Mullet Bay does Sun Resort consider that they have the option over to sell? Because if they're asking about structures that are, and I know how tricky it is in terms of how far you consider beach or not, but if they're asking about agreements, rental agreements, etc., for structures on the beach, then I ask myself and whether the minister knows whether it is considered, how far they consider the property that they have already put up for sale. Otherwise, why would they be asking about these structures? That is my concern in connection herewith. And again, I want to quickly run back to my request of 2022 regarding the same beach issues. So I would like to know that. But thank you, Minister. Your response to that question has been very clear. And I want to say, finally, I get to understand what I have been asking all along. I too, Madam Chair Lady, look forward to getting a response regarding the grid market and the roadmap issue. And I was actually going to ask the minister when I heard his response, I was going to say to the minister, Minister, I can't be dreaming. I did not invent the word roadmap in connection with grid market. I know I heard it. I know it was said in Parliament. So I too look forward to understand the roadmap of grid market. And if it is not a roadmap, what were the deliverables of grid market? And can these deliverables be shared? And then, Madam Chair Lady, this is more of a comment because it is somewhat off topic, albeit that I must add here that in committee meetings, there's a little more flexibility where it pertains to on topic. And indeed, under this topic of energy that ties into climate change, that, you know, we could go on and it really then becomes a very broad scope. But I asked myself through you, Madam Chair Lady, as a comment, and the minister, and I hope he sees it necessary to at least give me a take on it, but I'm just going to make it as a comment. And that is whether the minister has happened to be in the Coal Bay area yesterday. And if the minister happened to be in the Coal Bay area, would the minister have happened to be on the Orange Grove Road? And would the minister, if he was on the Orange Grove Road, happen to see...
Again, can we go off topic when it's convenient?
No, MP Marlin. MP Wescott, please. MP Marlin, you do not have the word. MP Wescott, please keep the topics under discussion
Madam
to the
Chair
TNO and
Lady,
Energy Report.
Thank you, and I understand what you're saying, but Madam Chair Lady, I am not asking questions off topic. I am using this committee meeting to make a statement and a comment on a topic that I believe is extremely important. Madam Chair Lady, we are in the hurricane season, and I'm going to repeat. And if I don't get a chance to do it here, I'll meet the minister outside and tell him how dangerous the situation on the Orange Grove Road was yesterday, where culverts have been built, completely filled the whole road, covered, and then I can't make that statement here, I will make the statement.
Thank
Minister
you.
doesn't have to answer, but Minister, the Orange Grove Road was a disaster. Thank God we have a very quick flowing
Thank you,
off
MP
of
Wescott.
water. Thank you, Madam
Thank you.
Chair Lady.
MP Marlin, now you have the word.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I say thank you to the previous speaker. Since we are going off and on topic, I would like to address in a similar manner, through you, Madam Chair, I'd like to ask the minister, have you driven on the road on Colby Hill yesterday to see the serious situation of the culvert? I will read a statement from the previous minister, not the previous administration, but the previous acting minister of CVROMI, who sat in the seat directly before this minister when a certain proposed minister couldn't pass screening to become a minister. And the statement reads, acting minister of CVROMI, Veronica Janssen-Webster, has stated that the repairs are scheduled to commence in the second week of June. We are now in the second week of July. So the second week of June, with the goal to complete the necessary works overnight to minimize the disruption, the process involves reconstruction of a damaged culvert. The word sinkhole didn't come from this member of parliament. It came from the previous acting minister of CVROMI. To act as if the word sinkhole came from members of parliament is insane. My question simply is, when will this culvert, sinkhole, crisis situation, if you have driven the Colby Hill Road yesterday and see how dangerous the situation was, when will this be addressed? What are the repairs options? Were an engineering company hired to see the situation, and when will it be addressed? One question: when? I thank you.
Thank you, MP Marlin. I will adjourn for 2 minutes to caucus. I see no one else signed in, so I will adjourn for 2 minutes to caucus with the minister on how long he would need to answer the questions and how we move forward. Meeting adjourned for 2 minutes. Welcome back to this committee CVROMI meeting and to the members of the committee. After deliberations with the minister, we will allow the minister to answer the request for clarification. I believe it was a couple points that were asked for brief clarifications, and the more expanded questions will be provided in writing. So I will pass the floor to the minister to make his closing remarks, in which he will also answer these points of clarification, and then the remaining answers, to ensure their completeness, will be sent in writing to the members of the committee. Minister, you have the floor.
Yep, thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, thanks to the members of Parliament for their questions. Let me begin by just making a couple of clarifications, and as stated, the long questions will be submitted in writing.
Members, those will be questions that cannot be answered on the spot. I would think that was a little more clarifications. Yes, there were some points of. Sorry, Minister.
Yeah?
There were some points of clarification requested.
Exactly.
The minister will be offering those answers for those clarification points. Anything that would require a further check will be sent in writing. Thank you.
I think just to also clarify, in the questions and how they were posed, or the statements posed, the members of Parliament actually stated clarification. So those are the ones that are going to be addressed. I'm not sort of choosing what to respond to. Clarifications was requested. The first clarification came from MP Jacobs. The trip to the Netherlands, was it about a TNO report, the SDA++, the GB? The trip undertaken by the Prime Minister was a holistic trip. It did not focus necessarily on any one topic. If you look at the statements and the releases made, they covered a vast array of things to which the government is very much find a priority. So even mental health was a part of this trip. Meetings with BZK was part of this trip. So it was not necessarily about any particular thing. There was a number of things that formed part of this trip, including SDA++, the opportunities that are there, funding for GB, the crisis. So it was quite a large range. So it wasn't necessarily about one singular thing. MP Jacobs actually asked for clarification, as did several other MPs as well, about what is it with grid market. And let me clarify very quickly. What, yeah?
Excuse me, Minister, MP Jacobs?
Yes, sorry, Madam Chair. Sorry to interrupt the minister. However, the question that was answered was not the question that I'd asked. And now this further clarification still doesn't answer the question that I asked, which was whether, even if there was a gamut of things that had gone, that the Prime Minister went to the Netherlands to discuss with the then government, was one of the solutions for NVGEBE related to the SDE Plus funds, or was there another source of funding being requested, a loan, or whatever the case may be? That's what my question was.
Okay.
And if it can be answered right now, it's also not a problem. I will be more than willing to accept those in writing. But I just wanted to be very clear on what I'd asked.
Thank you,
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady.
Minister?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, I will go back to my previous answer. Let me find it. Where it was stated essentially, yes, the funding, the meeting had two objectives. Several meetings had objectives, but these two meetings, I think the MP is. Let me be clear. The question related to what was the funding request. The funding request was for the long-term solution regarding the restoring of the 27 megawatts. I think the MP actually asked that question, where she stated, through you, Madam Chair, why are we asking for funding why we divert the 27 megawatts to alternative? Am I correct, through you, Madam Chair?
MP Jacobs?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I didn't record the question verbatim, but definitely in the intention with the question, maybe there was too much chatter around it. The question was related to my concern that the long-term plan was geared towards purchasing new engines that would be then, again, reliant on fossil fuels. So my question was, did the request in the discussion on assistance for GEBE, the Prime Minister specifically mentioned in one or more of his reports that he went to the Netherlands to find a solution for GB. So I'm asking, was that request for assistance to GB related to the SDE funds or to some other type of funds? And my opinion was that any solution for the long term should include sustainable energy and not be solely reliant upon what we already have and that needed to be repaired since whenever years ago. So maybe it got convoluted in the manner in which was asked, but for clarity, I just needed to know if SDE funds are being requested, or is it being drawn down from, or is BZK and or whichever other ministry making other funds available to assist GB, or is it a loan, or what is it?
Thank you, MP Jacobs. Minister.
Clearer?
Yep, thank you. And again, I go back to my statement where I said that the long-term solution is indeed for the generators, along with, like I stated before, SDE++, which is still open for Sint Maarten. So we have to realize several things, and I stated in my previous remarks, there is currently nothing in place for renewable energy. As such, we cannot examine only relying on SDE++ with a short or medium term solution. By short and medium term, it really is this month / the next couple of months. So within the next couple of months, because it has taken so many years, next couple of months, we're not going to have a renewable energy plan. So the long-term solution in the current energy construction is generation. That was a discussion of the financing, the loans, the funding, and the Prime Minister's trip, alongside, because I think it has to be something you do in tandem, it cannot be separated, a discussion about accessing these funds and how GEBE, upon the submission, the publication of the Energietics report, can then find a solution towards funding their plans for energy transformation for the future. So it's long-term in two senses. Long-term within the current structure of how we do energy in Sint Maarten, which is completely based on fossil fuel, and there's long-term in terms of where we want to go towards sustainable development. That's the clarification. And I just lost the clarifications. Okay, yes. MP Duran, you made a statement regarding who didn't show up to the court case and asking clarification, within which you stated that ministers don't appear at court. Indeed, the lawyers did not show up. Whether it's a lance advocate or not, it's the responsibility of the minister to ensure they are properly represented by the cases concerning our ministries. The court case itself is the minister versus Sun Resorts. As such, it is not the lawyer who didn't show up, it is the client or the party to the case that didn't show up.
1 second, Minister. MP Duran, you have a clarification of your clarification?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to be very clear, because it was the minister that mentioned, through you, Madam Chair, that the minister didn't show up. Now, just to give, put things in perspective to the listening public, how it works is that there are many cases against government, but you have to take the minister, or in some instances, is the land. So the country is being taken to court. So if the land advocate or whoever you hire as an advocate didn't show up, all I'm asking for is clarification on who handled the case, so I too can do some due diligence, and so that it doesn't happen to this minister again, that a lawyer that is notified doesn't show up. That's all I ask for clarification. Everything isn't always politics and a war. I just want clarification so that we can know who to look out for future cases to safeguard our patrimony. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Duran. Minister, you can continue.
Yeah, just to clarify again, and I hope this will end all sort of clarification on this point. It is not In this case, a case against Sint Maarten, it is a case against the ministry. Exactly, it is a case against the Ministry of, actually, corrected. It's a case taken the Minister van CVROMI, because, CVROMI, and as such, the Lands Advocate, it's not a case that necessarily would be. The argument basically is, it's not your lawyer that doesn't show up, it is the person who's the client that doesn't show up. So it's also my responsibility to say, if you appoint a court-designated person to represent you, as I've done myself in the past, you have to ensure that happens. The court doesn't say your lawyer hasn't appeared, the court says that you didn't appear.
MP Duran?
Thank you for the indulgence, Madam Chair. And last point, I just want to emphasize. We, moving forward, because according to the setup of our Constitution, this is the legislative side, the executive side. We all supposed to be fighting for Sint Maarten's best interest. I just want clarification on which lawyer, then let me ask it different. Which lawyer was representing Sint Maarten on that case during the previous administration? Can you please clarify that so that we can make sure that this doesn't happen again? Thank you, Madam Chair. I think that's a pretty straightforward clarification.
Thank you, MP Duran. Minister?
Yeah, indeed, Madam Chair, through you, the verdict does not state which lawyer doesn't appear. It just states the client, that is the minister, didn't appear. So we will check it again, and we'll of course share it with the Honorable MP and of course Secretariat. A clarification that I would like to actually make on this floor, the statement made by the MP that it was my person that signed off on the extension of Mullet Bay. That is indeed not the case. That was actually signed off prior to me becoming minister on June 25th. It was done by the acting minister. I'd like to also stress that no additional parcels or rights were added to this. It was literally and solely the renewal of a parcel of land from the 1970s. And then those are the only clarifications, and the others remain. Let me just verify. I want to show everyone the respect to their questions. No, that was. Didn't I cover that already? The grid market, the road. Oh, yes, sorry, apologies. I believe we did, through you, Madam Chair, talk about the agreement versus the roadmap. No, well, I can say it again. It's fine. The grid market. What was agreed, and I think it's very important, the roadmap was not signed off. What was signed off was an agreement to deliver a roadmap. That's very clear. I think in all my elucidations, I said to take on the roadmap. There is no completed roadmap because, like I said before, and I listed the 3 challenges that that grid market, TNO have all experienced is the roadmap, like the TNO report referencing Sint Maarten, is incomplete, and thus there is no roadmap. Clarifying again, what government signed is the agreement to pursue a roadmap. It has to be very clear because I see a lot of controversy around grid market, a lot of politicization of grid market, and I think one of the key things I want to leave on this discussion with is we don't have to politicize everything for the sake of wins. The reality is the fact that we couldn't get to the point of making this roadmap is because there was political interest. There was a lot of people who had different interests. And as such, we're reaching to the point where we're seeing it today, where self-interest and politics is continuing to play a damaging role in Sint Maarten. So again, clarifying, there is no roadmap. There is a signed agreement towards delivering a roadmap, which to date is not fulfilled. And with that, I come to the end of the clarifications.
Sorry,
Madam Chair.
Minister, I see MP Jacobs would like a clarification on her clarification.
Necessarily on a clarification. I'd just like to make a request for the minister to seek within the Council of Ministers decisions for an approval of a roadmap and get back to me in writing, if possible, through you, Madam Chair. That's all I would like to request, not something that for the minister to deliver today. However, as soon as possible, to peruse the archives, the P drive, or whatever it might be, in terms of meetings held in the Council of Ministers and an advice regarding said roadmap. Whilst I can agree with the minister that just like the TNO report, that it isn't complete without certain information from GEBE, that a document was delivered as one of the deliverables, as one of the MP's acts, whatever you want to call it. Said deliverable was made to the Council of Ministers, and the intention, yes, was for them to sit together to finalize, but not that there is nothing. So I really am not politicizing this, and I take offense to that statement, Madam Chair. I am solely trying to ensure that we, as the Parliament of St. Maarten, can have the same information that the government of St. Maarten is privy to. And as I mentioned before, if it needs to be done, just like TNO report was sent to the Parliament, to the Camera, and the minister gave a response to it, and it was shared publicly. If that can be shared publicly based on our agreements, fine. But then as our Parliament, we should be able to see what was presented as a deliverable from those persons that were contracted to do so confidentially. So that's my request, to seek for it and have it shared with Parliament confidentially. Thank you very much, Madam Chair Lady.
Thank you, MP Jacobs, and I do think, Minister, that maybe the question was kind of lost. I think my question would have been, if there is a roadmap signed off, then is it a complete roadmap, and can you sign off on something that has not actually received all of the additional information? But I look forward to getting that confidentially, hopefully, from the minister. I see MP Duran request the floor. I just want to clarify, is it a clarification on clarification again, or is it a new question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's just, I want to be clear, that's when we mix meetings in the sense of questions are asked verbally and then given response in writing, because the minister, through you, just mentioned that he answered all the clarifications, which is not the case, because I touched on the point where it comes to 45 little developments equals a big development, and what is a little development, what constitutes a little development, that was not addressed. So am I to assume that's a big question? And the other question that I had was, how was the information provided to GB, if it was? Was it via email, WhatsApp, conversation, signal? I don't know. That is why I would like some clarity on how we do things, and I think that it has to have a consensus, whereas if something is asked verbally, it be answered verbally. Based on my recollection of the rules of order, I didn't see that change since 2018 to now. So if that is the case, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's where we get lost, because now if the minister answers 3 things and I ask for 5 clarifications, I won't get it. So thank you for the opportunity, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Duran. And just as a note for the public, in the past as well, we have had questions asked verbally, especially in committee meetings, that are then answered in writing. So I will ask the minister if he can answer those last 2 clarification points from the MP. You have to hit your mic one more time. Ms.
Indeed, sorry, Madam, too close. Indeed, Madam Chair, I go back to my presentation where I stated what GB deems, or what actually is part of the concession agreement, is when it's above 500 kVA. That is something that the GB requests and proposes, and they proposes in a meeting, to be told that would have a direct impact on their grid. So just clarifying that, how do you define what's small and what's big is clearly mentioned, first of all, in the concession agreement as stated by myself in the presentation, Article 7, as well as confirmed by us in a meeting with GEBE.
Thank you, Minister. MP Duran?
Madam Chair, at this point, I think I just lose all hope in this current administration because, again, I just asked about how was the notice given to GB. And also, I asked about the building stop and the specifications. So if it's a question that the minister need to research, Madam Chair, I understand. But please indicate that so it don't get lost and we never receive an answer. I won't be interrupting anymore. At this point, I give up. Thank you.
Yes.
Minister?
Madam Chair, again, going back to what I said in my presentation, a lot of these clarifications and sort of seemingly questions that are coming have been asked and answered several times throughout my presentation, but I'll do it again because, of course, I respect this honorable House. There is, again, I said, no building stop. That was the final clarification just now asked. The MP indicated that was said by my party. I think we have to look at it from the point of view of two things. We don't discuss parties in here, that's one. Two, the discussion was, if I recall, about reviewing moratorium on big developments which cause a lot of stress on our grid. It never spoke about stopping development. And as I clarified in my presentation, had the MPs recalled it, it was online, it was live, the discussion has never been about looking at development as a stop. It's about sustainable development. It's not about just stopping development, because that's not what we're about. As a minister, I've taken that policy in myself, where I said, and I clarified several times in press briefing, there's no intention to stop development. There's no moratorium at all. It's just a question of being responsible in your decision-making.
Thank you, Minister, for your responses.
Yeah, sorry, the last point again.
Okay.
Again, I confirmed, now this is again, that this was communicated in a meeting with GB regarding how much they would need to be informed, and therefore what is a large versus small development. I think I've been clear, and I do hope that clarifications are now rested, and I look forward to sending you the responses through you, Madam Chair and Secretariat. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. I would like to thank the Minister of Public Housing, Spatial Planning, Environment, and... One moment. How long would you need to return the answers in writing, Minister? Just to clarify, so I don't get a letter about it.
Yep, Madam Chair, I think by Wednesday, that should be fine. Yep.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister. So I would like to thank the Minister of Public Housing, Spatial Planning, Environment and Infrastructure, Mr. Patrice Gums, and his support staff for their presence here today and for providing the necessary information. We will await the answers in writing by next week, Wednesday. Ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end of this meeting. I thank you all for your participation and hereby close this meeting.